Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on A World Awakening. I have a very special guest tonight and a very special friend. And not everybody that I bring on the show do I know the way I know Bill Konkolesky. He's the director of Michigan's MUFON. The director of Michigan MUFON. What's the word? I'm looking for the word. It's gone. Okay, it'll come back to me. But one of the things that just before we blew out of Soul School, which is my first show on Friday nights, I told Bill, since we slammed through that first hour as though it was 5 minutes long, I told him that what we were going to do is we were going to get him a special subatomic particle beam clock with the ability to slow the rotation of the Earth so that our shows last a little bit longer and we can all enjoy each other's company more. And with that, organization, that's the word, MUFON, the organization known as MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. Oh, yeah. Okay. COVID brain. So with that, let's bring my friend, Bill Konkolesky in. Hi. I love your spaceship.
Oh, yeah. AI art can do wonders. I actually was going to go with a different one, and this one was preloaded, and I was like, oh, keep it.
Well, you can always say the other one's in the shop. You know, it's like Jaguars. You've got to have two so that you've got something to drive because one's always being repaired. So yeah, if you'd like to, we're gonna start a fun, and we're gonna get Bill a subatomic particle clock so that we can slow the rotation of the Earth and buy us a few more minutes on each one of our shows. But I have to tell you, Bill, and I'm not trying to embarrass you at all. I just need to speak honestly and openly about my affection and my admiration for you and what you have accomplished in your life thus far, and your trajectory is inspiring to me. And I've been at a number of events with you over the years, and whenever I'm able to break away and slip into the back of the room when you're lecturing is always my favorite part of the whole event, and I try to, a lot of times people will see me and they'll come over and they'll start talking. So I hide, I hide and I listen. And I always learn something profound and prophetic and, so significant to what I'm doing with my life that I have a tendency to blend what you're sharing into that recipe, that concoction that I'm still working on, and make it one of the ingredients. So I want to thank you personally for that, because of all the people that I have met over the years in this particular field of study and research, I find your story one of the most compelling. And I'm sure there are people who are listening and watching who had not had the pleasure to meet you yet. And so I wanted to give you the beginning of the show just to bring our audience up to speed on who you are, what you do, and where you're going.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much. And you're pretty special too. So thanks. And thanks for having me on. So I am the state director currently for the Michigan chapter of the Mutual UFO Network. First of all, if nobody's heard of MUFON, maybe MUFON's the world's largest civilian UFO research organization, over 5,000 members in over 40 countries. And what we do is we investigate UFO sightings. People report their sightings to us. We investigate them, try to determine what it is they've seen. And the ones that we can't identify are often very interesting events. And so I've been doing this for 20 years. MUFON's been around since 1969. I have not been around since 1969, but I've been a member since 93. And how I became a member was reporting a sighting to MUFON in 1989 when I was a high school senior. Me and two friends were in his Chevette, a buddy's Chevette, and we were parked outside another friend's house. It was February, it was dark out, and this blue ball of light about the size of a car, about the height of two telephone poles, slowly drifted over the car. And we all three saw it the same, and we're like, what the heck is that? And then a white ball of light came and zigzagged all over the sky, ping-ponged all over the sky, disappeared. And then a red ball of light appeared in the center of the sky, grew about the size to a full moon, which is quite large, shrank, and then disappeared. And we all saw it. We all remembered it the same. One of my friends says, oh, we should tell the police. And I'm like, we're a bunch of high school seniors. You know, what are the police going to do? We just tell them we saw a UFO or several UFOs. And then another friend says, oh, maybe we should tell the military. And because Selfridge Air National Guard Base is quite close to Sterling Heights, Michigan, where this occurred. And I'm like, okay, so we're not going to tell the police, but we're going to tell the military. And so we didn't know what to do. We didn't know who to tell. We didn't know where to turn. And a few years later, when I was in college, a friend of mine told me about the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago. I went there, told them about my sighting, and they said, how come you didn't tell your state MUFON chapter? I'm like, MUFON, what's that? And so I came back to MUFON in Michigan, told my story, and Shirley Coyne, the director of Michigan MUFON at the time, received my story. And turns out Shirley was also the head of MUFON's abduction research team at that time. I'm like, oh, you know, Shirley, this wasn't my first unusual thing that's ever happened to me. And so I told her, started with the very first memory of I have in my life. I was 2 years old in a crib in my room, and it was at night, and I was still awake. I had not yet fallen asleep when a little gray guy came into my room, giant black eyes, walked up to the edge of the crib and was staring at me. I screamed for my parents. My mom just said, go to sleep, go to sleep. And I didn't know what to do, just staring at this thing. It's my very first memory in life. And this thing then walked out of the room, and I don't know where it went. Part of me thinks it went to see one of my older brothers, but I had no idea. And this isn't anything that came back to me several years later. This was something that burned into my memory the very moment it happened, and I never forgot it. And then when I was 4, they came back again, 3 of them in the afternoon. I'm going to just give super edited versions of this here because it's a lot, but I've got books if you want to buy books. But
Yeah,
so
check out the books.
telling my full story.
Fantastic.
But so then at age 7, they came back again. I was taken aboard. They cut my arm. I still had the scar on my arm. And then 9, 10, all through my teen years, very heavily in my teen years. Sometimes I was being taken more than once a week. And then it built and went really up to about my mid-20s. And then it started to slow down a bit. And at age 30, it mostly took a pause. And then recently I've had a couple of abductions, but I don't think I'm ready to talk about the recent stuff, to be honest.
That's okay. Whatever you're comfortable with, sweetheart.
But, everything up until that point really formed who I am. A fellow experiencer by the name of Sandy Nichols asked me once, do I ever wish that this didn't happen to me? And, I had to pause, and I said, I told him, I'm like, I don't know if I would recognize myself. I would be an entirely different person. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that I could answer that. So it's been ingrained in my life, my whole life. And there are a couple of things. If you have a bunch of questions, that's great. But if not, I want to set myself up for one thing that I think is really important that I want to say about the phenomena. If that's cool. Okay. So
I have no questions. This show is yours. I want you to impart your wisdom to everyone that comes in contact tonight or through the archive later. That's the important thing, is to give you this show to share whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. So there are two particular, I glossed over a bunch of the things that had happened to me, but there are two events in particular that I want to bring up and that have been really revelatory to me for this phenomena, and where I think attention really needs to be focused. The first, it was the very last hypnotic regression that I got from Shirley. Shirley was great. She was not only the Michigan State Director, not only the head of abduction research for MUFON, but she was a state licensed hypnotherapist who regressed me for free. And that was pretty phenomenal. And her husband, George, he was the regional director for MUFON at a time when they had that role. And so these people were pretty big deals in the organization, and were really mentors for me to get involved. But cutting back to the regression, it was my sixth regression with Shirley. I think it must have been at the beginning of '94. And the setup was that I would come in and we'd go to Shirley's office. They lived in a trailer home, but there was one of the rooms that was set up with a recliner and her desk and everything. And that's where we did the regression sessions. So I went and I sat in a chair, as I always did. And Shirley went down, brought me down into the regression. George was outside the room laying on a couch. Now, normally when we would do these sessions, Shirley would say, okay, so what do you want to investigate this time? And I'd be like, I want to investigate that thing, what happened when I was 2. I want to investigate this thing that happened when I was 16, things like that. And I have to say, regression, at least for me, has been tremendous. Details that have come out under hypnosis, I've been able to prove are true. Things I didn't remember on the surface, little details about my living arrangements, for example, that came out under hypnosis were absolutely spot on. So I have full faith in it. And Shirley was great. She was not a leading regressionist. She just said pretty much, oh, and then what happened? Oh, and then what happened? And let me explain what was going on. So in this last one, though, I was sitting in a chair, the recliner, and instead of me going back easily into a memory, as I often did, things felt a little bit different this time. And anytime I tried to focus on any one of the things that had happened to me in my life, it felt like it was being blocked. Like something was actively stopping me from trying to remember things. And it was a little frustrating. Like, what's this? This is new. This is different. And while that was happening, I noticed my eyes were closed and they were so heavy I couldn't open them, but the room started to feel lighter and brighter. And suddenly I'm in this completely white space. This isn't some sort of imagination. This isn't a regression. I was actually I don't know if I would say physically, because it didn't feel physical, but my essence was in this pure white space. And as I'm trying to figure out what's going on, this voice comes telepathically to me and says, you always try to focus on the negative things that have happened to you with regards to these interactions. The fear, this awful feeling of helplessness and all this. And the voice said, you're looking at it all wrong. We are here with you. We are always here with you. You are going to be fine because we can see the entirety of your life from where we are. And you are concerned that we're going to come back. Well, here's our guarantee to you that we are going to come back again and again and again. And I'm like, is that supposed to be reassuring?
Comforting, yeah. Uh-huh.
And then I felt myself like slipping away from that. And things started to get darker. Again, my eyes are closed, but then everything's getting darker and darker. and I feel myself getting pulled back into the chair, and then wham, slammed into the chair. Like I felt like suddenly I gained 1,000 pounds all at once. And the physicality of sitting there in that chair and the sensations of the chair under my hands and everything, it was jarring being back in that sort of weighted physicalness. And
3D is very oppressive. Yes.
And then I started to come out of it, and I open my eyes and I see Shirley over there, and she's reading, and she goes, "Oh, we lost you there for a little while." And I didn't know what to say. And I just said, "Okay, I need to go to the bathroom." So I got up, went to the bathroom, and it being a trailer park home, the walls were pretty thin in the home. And I hear Shirley talking to her husband, George, and George outside the bathroom. And George says to Shirley, he goes, "There were 3 of them in here." And she's like, "What?" He goes, "There were 3 of them in here. They showed up right when you went in, a few minutes after I knew you regressed them, and they only left a moment ago." And I'm still in the bathroom, and I'm overhearing this. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I just had the weirdest experience, and now I'm hearing this afterwards, and I'm still out of it. I'm still groggy. And so I come out of the bathroom, I walk in, and they're both sort of ashen. They have this look on their face like, oh. And then so I'm like, "Oh, what's up?" And Shirley's like, "Oh, nothing." I'm like, okay, I heard you talking maybe about some UFO stuff or something." And Shirley's like, "Oh, no, not at all." And then I was just like, okay, this is weird on top of weird on top of weird. And I said, I have to go. And so I drove home, and up until that point in my life, I mean, since pretty much when I could remember, I was afraid to go to sleep at night. Lights on, radio or TV on, dog in the room when I can.
I can't.
I mean,
I cannot sleep unless the television is on and the lights are on. I cannot.
I really went out, including I had a fan blowing on me. So even if I closed my eyes, if somebody walked in front of that fan, I could sense like the air stop, and
I
would open my eyes.
Same thing, exactly the same. And we didn't discuss this prior to doing the show. This I'm discovering right now that these are similarities that we share, and I don't think it's coincidence. I don't believe in such a thing.
And so the thing is, yeah, I went home. And it was later when I got home, and I went in my room and I laid in the bed. I'm like, I don't really need the light on. I don't need that TV on or radio. I'm okay. And I turned off the light, and ever since, that cured me. That episode, that event, that situation cured me. And I can't even tell you how. And I'm almost afraid to look at, like, psychoanalyze it too deeply, because I can figure out, I'm like, oh, that's the trick they played on me. And then I'll be afraid to sleep with the lights off again. But it left a huge impression on me. And it's been something that stayed with me because I've been able to sleep in a much better place now. It's never perfect when you have this type of thing happen to you. There's always that little part of you that wonders if something's going to happen that night. And sometimes your spidey senses start to tingle, and you're like, I think something is going to happen. And sometimes you're right. But the other event, if I can keep going, and then I'll tie them together. In 1995, I was in my mid-20s. It was getting to a time in my life when I'm thinking like, oh, I should settle down. I should find somebody and, start this next phase of my life. Did the college thing, ready to do the adult thing. And this girl that I started dating, I hadn't told her about the abduction stuff, the UFO stuff yet. Hadn't brought it up. Unless you really know that other person's into it, it's kind of tricky to lead with that. It's not
Yes,
maybe the
it
best
is.
idea. So,
A
but yeah,
little bit.
you, you can't lead with it, but you can't ignore it. At some point, you're going to have to tell them, because at some point, they're going to be around you when something happens.
Right.
And that is quite a sucker punch. Like, wait, what a way to find out that this person's being abducted is like, oh my gosh, you're here. And we've never even discussed this. So I thought I was still in the sweet spot. Things were going well, and I hadn't brought it up yet. And this girl and I were on in this park, this big hiking trail place that's not too far from me still. I still live in Southeast Michigan. And we're walking along the trails, and we were doing it as sort of a day trip. And the thought, she said, oh, let's watch the sunset. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. So we found this nice isolated hill, and we're sitting there and watching the sunset. And then as it's getting dark, she's like, oh, let's stargaze. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's stargaze. And so we laid a blanket out, and then stargazing, turned to smooching on the blanket. And there was it was spring. It was the May of 95, and there weren't crickets, but there were frogs and other noises that were going on in the woods. And then suddenly all the noises just cut out at once. Couldn't hear a thing.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, we're on this hill in this park and nobody else is around. I'm like, darn it. How could I fall into this trap? And so I got up, she got up. And we started to hear footsteps coming up the hill. So we went to the center of the hill, and for brevity, I'm going to tell an edited part of this, because to tell the full story is a lot. And I do encourage people, pick up my book, please, and hear the whole story, because it's much stranger than even I'm going to explain here. Mm-hmm. So we go up to the center of the hill, and suddenly we're paralyzed. Again, edited version of the story. And then we're staring at each other as we're paralyzed, she and I. And we see off to the left, because I could move my eyes just a little bit. 3 little gray guys come up the hill, surround us, and don't seem to be very interested in me, but I know I'm the one that brought them there. And they're looking her up and down, and they're telepathically saying to each other, no, not her. No, she's not the one. No, she's no good for him. And then they walk away, and then we're unparalyzed. We grab our stuff. We run for the car, which I think is like a half mile from where we were, and got in the car, said nothing, absolute silence in the car trip home. We're almost back to her place, and she says, I'm not ready to go home yet. And I'm like, okay, what do we do? So I had an idea, and it turned out to be a pretty good idea. We pulled into Meyer Thrifty Acres, big box store, the parking lot for Meyer, open at that time 24 hours. And we go into the store, and we're like touching things like mops and boxes of cereal and, just anything. We're saturating ourselves in this sort of normalcy, this world, this normal world stuff. And
like the reassurance that you are actually back in the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then they had a pet department at the time, and the hamsters are night owls, and so we sat and we watched the hamsters for a little bit, and then she's like, okay, I think I can go now. So we go back to my car. I drop her off. Next day, we don't talk at all. The following day after that, she calls and breaks up with me. Mm-hmm. And while I never told her that what had happened had anything to do with me, it's clear that it had everything to do with me. Mm-hmm. And I was defenseless. How do you come back from something like that? And the reason I pick on those 2 particular stories is that I think in the current state of abduction research, investigation, interest, that there are two different types of experiences I just explained that happened in my life. One is one where I sort of went to their world, this white space, this plane of consciousness, if you will.
Mhm.
I went there and I brought something back with me. I brought sort of a courage or, some sort of inner peace. And the other one, they came to our world and stuck their thumb in my reality.
Yeah.
Took an interest in my mundane dating life, and if they didn't set up that whole thing to do exactly what they did, then it is like quite a coincidence that things unfolded the way they did. And so I think that one of the things that I really want to see more of in the current interest in this phenomena is not when we go to their world and take an interest or learn about the greater universe, but when they come to our world and take an interest in our lives.
Mhm.
I think it's important for an experiencer who's just coming out of their shell that whoever they tell their story to, if it's somebody in the field of ufology, someone like myself or many others that do the types of things that I do, that we meet the experiencer where they are.
Mhm.
We don't add anything to their story.
Right.
We hear, we learn about their story. We don't stop them from talking.
Mhm.
Let them tell as much as they can. Let them get it all out in their words with their filters before we put any frosting on the story and saying, this is what it means that happened to you.
Right.
And because if somebody would have stopped me talking, and told me an answer like, it's these beings from this place.
Mhm.
And, you made an agreement before you were on this planet, which may or may not be true. I wouldn't have taken the time to do a deep self-evaluation of everything that happened to me and be able to plot out all these points of these experiences across my whole life that connect. It's a tapestry. It's a beautiful, just amazing story of coincidences, synchronicities, bizarre happenings, and it, and to stop an experiencer from going on that journey, that hero's journey, that they themselves can go through their experiences, pull it together, and they don't need to hear that, of a greater spiritual aspect, not at the beginning anyway. It's not necessarily helpful at the beginning. They need comfort and they need to be allowed to talk and think and put things together. It's their jigsaw puzzle, and everybody has a different one, and every one of them is beautiful. And that's really, I think, the heart of this. There's another aspect of this as well. There are some people that are scientifically minded that make everything a data point. They will say, 33% of experiencers had been taken from a car. I'm just making up the numbers
Mhm. Yeah.
here,
As an example, yes, I understand.
and 58% have had something happen with their ear or whatever. And they boil out the witness, the experiencer, and turn it into data and say, look, I understand this phenomena because look at this number. We
Mhm.
spoke to hundreds of experiencers, maybe even thousands. Put these numbers together, and I give you truth. The truth is from the mouth of the experiencer.
It
That's the truth.
is. And every story is different. Every experience is different. And it is intimate. It's
Mhm.
that personal. And what people fail to realize, I think, well, as just a point of reference, I sleep with the lights on and some noise in the background, and usually a fan to keep the air moving. just exactly the way that you do. But I do it for an entirely different reason. I want to, first of all, I have absolutely no fear. I never have. None. Zero fear. I want to see them if they arrive. I want to feel if my eyes are closed and they arrive. I want to feel the change in the air so that I know to open my eyes. And because my mind races 1,000 miles an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it is only the repetitious music on the Weather Channel or some mundane background noise or just, some soundscapes music or something that short circuits that activity, because otherwise I feel like my brain's going to explode. I've never been bored a moment in my life. I do not know what that feels like. I know the definition, but I don't know what it feels like. And so the only way that I can go into sleep state is to keep all this activity going on around me, and it helps short circuit and blocks it out so that I can go to sleep. But all my experiences, and you and I have talked enough about this, Bill, that as alike as they are, is as different as they are. And yet they all fall into the same category. I don't use the word abduction to describe what I've experienced, because I know, that to me, there's kind of a negative connotation that goes along with that word, like being taken against your will. I have never had an experience with our galactic family that was against my will. Absolutely not. I welcome them, cheer like I'm a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. So excited. Oh my God, here's a new gift box. What's in this one? Let me open this. And so I have an entirely different visceral emotional reaction, but it's, and yet, some of those puzzle pieces that we each have to put together to build our puzzle are identical. And I think that's a fascinating thing. I have to, I'm going to hop in here just for a second, Bill, and make a public apology to you and give you a gift tonight. I did something at Houghton Lake last September that is entirely out of character for me. And that was, I introduced you to somebody very special to me. And then I dragged him away unceremoniously so that I could go and introduce him to John Tenney. With there not being any implication that you were somehow less significant than John Tenney. I was just afraid John Tenney was going to be utterly surrounded by people and I would never get to actually introduce him in the moment. It felt like it was that moment. It was that opportunity. And in retrospect, upon reflection, I feel that what I did was entirely counterintuitive to who I am as an individual. And I interrupted your conversation with my friend Rupert. And so that said, I wanted to apologize to you publicly for doing that. And even though I know you got to spend time together over the course of the weekend, and because you brought up the whole idea of scientists and their data, I have a scientist who doesn't rely specifically on data, even though he understands the significance of it, but he is also an experiencer and is also someone who's fascinated by your journey and your story. So if he's with us, Bill, please bring Rupert on so that he can, there we go. I took him away. I am giving him back to you. You don't have you're muted, honey. Okay.
Oh, now he's gone.
And now he's gone.
It was good while it lasted. Thank you, though.
It was. And I just, I wanted to give you a chance to. He'll figure it out because he's a scientist, for Christ's sake.
No. He's in another podcast with Tenny. You don't have to cover anything else.
Oh yeah, Tenny's What's Up Weirdo podcast. It's quite something. Yes, it is.
Okay. Some non-human entity just exited me out of the show just there.
Oh God.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, it's good to see you again, Bill.
Yeah,
how are you doing?
Right back at you. Supersonic. Doing supersonic.
So talk amongst yourselves for a few minutes while we still have some time left in the show.
Well, you've said some fascinating things today, Bill. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions about your experiences?
Right on. And I'll say maybe I can answer, maybe I can't. But yeah, fire away.
Yeah, and if I ask any questions and you don't want to go there, that's fine, absolutely fine. But I'm curious to know, have you ever reached out to them? Have you ever done anything like remote viewing, astral projection to them? Have you tried to communicate with them in a spiritual or a psychic way, for example?
Sure. And I'm trying to think of anything that I've done that was really structured. And I will say, just on the topic of remote viewing, when somebody remote views seriously and over a duration of time, they sort of pick up superpowers. They connect when they're not in session. They tend to draw phenomena to them. And I know experiencers, people who've remote viewed, who've become experiencers seemingly because of their time remote viewing, even if they don't remote view anything, well, I don't know, as a broad umbrella term, extraterrestrial or anything unusual like that. I have not specifically remote viewed them. I feel that in a way that there's always an open channel. There have been times in my life where they've played guardian angel, stepped in and prevented harm from coming to me, which lets me think that they're always around. They're always connected in that sense. And that they are still watching every step of my path. And I do feel that if I were to communicate with them, that they would hear me. They have sometimes said things to me. Downloads is, I guess, a popular vernacular for that term for that. I'll just give an example of one download I had, which it was kind of amusing. It was about 4 a.m, and I got this like thought in my head, plugged in my head, that said, you can't stop us from landing in your backyard. I'm like, that's weird. What's that about? And I fell back asleep. And a couple hours later, I woke up to go to work, walked out to my car, and I'm like, oh yeah, I put this like swing set and this sort of playground equipment up for my daughter the previous day. And I'm like, did they think that I did that? Kind of like, so like the little pointy things on buildings to keep the pigeons from landing. They think I did that to stop them. And I just started laughing out loud at that. I'm like, oh my gosh, and maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a joke, which would have been even cooler that they have a sense of humor like that. But, I don't, because I don't think I've ever said this on any podcast. I've dabbled in remote viewing. I have great respect for it. I've had some enough success with it to know it's authentic.
It is. And
one target, a fellow experiencer gave me several years ago when I was first learning it. Courtney Brown had an online course at his Farsight website. May or may not be there still. I don't know. And I know some people have gone all in and spent thousands of dollars with the people that had done it for the government and things like that. I never went fully that into it. But anyway, back to the story. So I had a friend who was an experiencer give me a set of targets. And when you go through the process, I'm assuming that you've done some remote viewing, Rupert?
Absolutely, yes. I teach workshops in it.
Okay, so the whole thing where you get your first impressions and you build on those impressions, and then pretty soon you're sketching and then improving on that sketch, deducting all the things that your brain really wants it to be, but you can't admit it. All of that stuff. So when I sat down to the paper and I put the pen in my hand, I drew a star on the paper, like a giant star, and then I put the pen down, and it was, and I'm like, this is it. Somehow this is it. I can't go any further. There was no sort of fiddling around with like the little details. Blammo, a star, and that was it. So then I found out what the target was, and immediately after, and it turned out it was an actual star. It was like Alpha Centauri, something like that, was the target. And I just thought that was so hilarious that I drew a star and I couldn't do anything more with it.
That is fantastic. What I find when I do remote viewing, if you're remote viewing a tagged target or a picture or a location that somebody has assigned for you, you go through those processes and you see the different bits, and it's a bit like how they used to do in the CIA. Incidentally, you can go to the CIA website and download their instruction manual for how to do remote viewing. It's published, it's there. But when you're remote viewing to non-human entities, it's a two-way process, because you go up to them and they turn around and they look at you and say, "Oh, hello," and then they help you. And so people's perceptions very often are far more clear, and you end up being able to not just remote view but remote communicate. And actually next week on my Galactic Wisdom show, I'm bringing in a team of remote viewers to remote view Bill's connection to ETs, UFOs, etc. I do that quite often to try to get information about people's experiences. Now, I'm guessing you've figured out the reason behind your experiences by now?
To some limited degree. Yeah. It's difficult to tell sometimes whether I'm overplaying my instinct, and or if I'm correct and I don't want to admit it.
Yeah. Well, if you ever did want to probe into those reasons more, I'd be happy to set up a little remote viewing session with my team, and you could join in and we could try and communicate with the beings that are connecting with you.
I think that Bill would make an excellent guest on your Galactic Wisdom show as well.
Yeah,
I really do. I was so delighted when the two of you, met and got together and became engrossed in conversation, because I was like, they're supposed to have this conversation. And then, I broke it up, but still, now it's re-engaged, and his stories, it would take hours and hours to even delve into, the minutia of all of that he has experienced. And I think it's of great value to the world, and in a lot of different ways, but primarily because it gives others freedom to tell their own story. There's that liberation factor that I have found exists in my life experiences and sharing them with others. But also, it's so nice when he lectures and, to almost see the light bulbs go off above people's heads. Like, something like that happened to me too, and he had that experience and he survived it, and he's brave enough to talk about it. And so maybe I should too. And it really is. It's a beautiful thing. It's like watching a flower bloom.
Cool. If I can rewind just a couple minutes, Rupert, when you said, okay, so this is like some regular show that you do that you're talking about, right, with the remote viewers?
Okay. Well, I do a lot of stuff outside of my
Oh, shoot.
show for
Okay.
KGRA, but I do have a KGRA show called Galactic Wisdom on Thursdays, and it is in next Thursday's show that I'm going to bring in my remote viewing team to remote view Bill's connection to ETs.
Now, when you say Bill, you mean producer Bill? Or...
Yes.
I mean producer Bill.
Okay, because you made me nervous there for a minute.
Oh, he just does that naturally. He makes me nervous all the time.
I didn't even think that you're Bill, he's Bill. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you something completely off topic. Once a month, I get an email that makes me panic, and the subject heading of the email is "Bill is ready," and I immediately think, "Oh no, Bill's waiting for me. Have I forgotten?" But it's my electric company.
Yeah, we hate them.
Great.
Yeah. I just got an electric bill today that would make your head spin off. Oh my God. But it was worth every Christmas light that we've still got up. So I don't care. I'll just split it with my sister. It's very important what we're doing. Just having a comfortable, nonchalant conversation about extraterrestrials is, in a way, I think, normalizing something that a lot of people would consider abnormal because they have no familiarity with it. But Bill, I did have one question for you. When you talked about the cut in your arm and that you still have a scar, do you think that was about healing you or tracking you or something else entirely?
I don't really know. This.
And did it hurt? Do you remember if it hurt?
Oh, it hurt. It hurt. Yeah. Just to go through the story a little bit, I was in bed, and this black circle opened up over the bed. It was just this blackness, and this metal sort of hose rope sort of thing came down and started whipping around really quickly and shooting off sparks. I can't explain it. I can only describe it. And then as it was whipping around and the energy was building up around it, I felt energy in me build up. And then I felt like I was sucked sort of into whatever energy. And then I was planted in this small room with two little grays in front of me. The light was kind of like this bluish light. And I felt like I was sort of like in a mud room. Like this was like the entrance to a craft. And that somehow that room was meant to make it safe for me to enter the craft, like take away any sort of virus or anything, whatever, clean me somehow. And again, I'm 7. And these guys are about the same height as me. We go into the next room, and there's a metal bed in the middle of the room. And there's another being in there now. There's 3 of them. And they, instead of having me go up on the bed, which I assumed was going to happen, they left the room. The 3 of them, they went off in this door on the left. So I decided, well, if they're going to go off to the left, there's a door on the right. I'm going to go through that door. And I don't think I remember being particularly nervous. I mean, a little nervous, but the curiosity in me was really something. And I just walked down this hallway until I got to a dead end. And it turned out they were right behind me. I don't know for how long. They ushered me into the side room, and there was another being like them. They were about 3 feet tall. This one was about 5 feet tall. And he told me to sit in this chair. It looked like a dentist chair. Not very inviting, but I sat in it, and I felt like I was magnetically stuck to the chair. There were no straps, but I couldn't move. And it got right in my face with its big black eyes and said, "Be really good, and you'll get to see the color blue." And I'm like, blue? You're a kid, you go to the doctor, they give you a sticker or a sucker, right? I get to see the color blue. And then at that point, I just felt a really sharp pain in my right arm, like a slice. And I look down, and as I'm watching, I don't see what cut my arm. I see it healing right in front of me. And I don't know why it's healing. I don't know how it's healing. And so, and then I turned to look at the being who's in my face again, and its big black eyes turned to a bright blue eyes. Like it changed the color of its eyes to this bright blue, and it was tranquilizing, mesmerizing. This bright cerulean blue just washed over me, and I felt really relaxed. Woke up in bed the next day. There's the scar, and it was not there the day before, but it was healed-ish. And later that day, a little interesting sequel to the previous night, I was in the backyard climbing trees with a friend of mine who was 6 from across the street, and this white mist rolled into the backyard. I thought it was smoke at first, but it was this cool, sort of like a fog machine mist. And in that mist was a little gray being. It came up to me and asked me telepathically if I was all right. And I said, yeah, I'm okay. And it seemed satisfied. And the mist rolled into the neighbor's backyard with this little guy in it. And it just kept going. And my friend, who I'm still in touch with, remembers the mist quite vividly. You know, you don't forget this cloud driving through your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
He never saw the being inside, but he remembers the mist. He can testify at least to that. And when I tell the story, because when experiencers out there hear things that match theirs, they share a similar story as well. And there's a gentleman that I recently had lunch with who was part of the Voices of Contact show. He was one of the experiencers on that. Told me a just chillingly similar story that happened to him when he was young. I tell you the story as I know it. I don't know if the point was some medical thing, a healing thing. I don't know.
Maybe it was just so that they could show you that they could heal you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was just that.
And anytime, I have the slightest doubt about any of it, I just look at my arm. I'm like, nope, that happened.
Oh, that happened. That's real. Well, we are out of time, my sweet gentlemen. I love you both so much. And Rupert, thank you for being Bill's special surprise tonight. I promise when we're together again, I'll stay completely out of it. I will not interfere. Let you guys have your conversation. But yes, I thank you both. And Bill Konkolesky, anybody that needs to reach you, you have a website, you have a place that people can get right to you?
Yeah, I'm easy to find on MUFON.com, MIMUFON.org, which is a Michigan site, or my personal site where I talk more about what we talked about tonight is experiencer.me. That's .me, experiencer.me.
And those links are connected to the archive of this show as well. And everybody knows how to get to Rupert through me and write directly to him. So I thank you both from the bottom of my heart. This was an important show tonight. And Bill, our producer, Bill, the one that's got a studio full of blow up dolls that look like, I'm sorry, they don't look like that, okay? But they're really cute blow-up dolls anyway. We'll do this again. We'll do this again and again because what we're doing is important and it's truly enlightening the world. And so with that, I'll say goodnight to everyone and remind you all that we need to be the change we wish to see in the world. And so go forth and be the light you seek. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on A World Awakening. Good night, my friends.